All right, it is 2:15 and 60 minutes to get through what I would love to get through is always never enough time. I would love to spend 3 hours with all of you on this stuff, but we have 60 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to post the link in the chat one more time. I'll be posting it as we are going through. But if there's anybody out there who'd love to help, if somebody says, "Hey, where's that link again?" and you notice I'm not putting it in, if you can throw that in there for me, that'd be fantastic. We are going to be utilizing some generative tools. Gemini, I need to change that slide. Gemini.google.com is where you'd see Google's generative tool. And then chat.openai.com, that's where you'd find Chat GPT, one of the more popular ones because it's one of the first to market out there. And all of the links that I'm going to be sharing out today can be found at that bottom link, qlearns.org/gen_AI, which is why I've been posting that in the chat for you. That is constantly updated. So if you want to keep that, bookmark it, use it as a resource, share it out with other people, please feel free to do that. So today we're going to be looking at how to become a prompt genius. A lot of times, some of the reasons we have very bad outputs or results from a generative tool, it's because our prompt isn't that good. One of the things a lot of people say is garbage in, garbage out. If you're trying to use a prompt like you would search the internet, you're not going to receive a very good output. Prompts need to be thought out well in advance. You need to know what you want to do. You have to have something ready to go and know what you want to ask of these tools. Imagine it's a new employee that you've hired or a new teacher that is coming into the district and or your school board, and you're trying to explain to them some things of how to do some work. You need to be thoughtful about how you're introducing them to what you would like them to do. That's what you have to do with these tools. They are very literal when it comes to your prompt, so you need to be as descriptive as possible, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The only thing on this slide you need to know is my name is Joe Marquez. I am Director of Academic Innovation for Q, which is the ISTE affiliate here in California. It used to stand for Computer Using Educators, but now Q just stands for Good Teaching because we incorporate curriculum and design, curriculum instruction, pedagogical shifts, and educational technology. So all of the above. But just make sure you have my email there because you all have complete access to me after today. I always like to say whenever I present, I meet new friends, and now we are new best friends, and best friends stay in contact with one another. So please never hesitate to reach out, even for something as simple as, hey, you mentioned this one tool. I can't find it in your Padlet. What was that? An easy ask. Please never hesitate to reach out. All right. You've probably learned a lot today. You've probably gone through a lot of generative tools since ChatGPT has come out in the past. There's a lot going on. But I want us to just pause for a second. Take a second, take a breath, and realize what you are experiencing in life right now. We are experiencing something as monumental as when the telegraph was invented, where people could finally communicate over vast distances. I mean, it was only dots and beeps and such, but it was still communication. It changed the way we communicated. This is a moment in time as if it was the first invention of the telephone, right? Where Alexander Graham Bell made that first phone call. Now, this is as monumental as that first television broadcast. We are in a time that is drastically going to change how humanity communicates, collaborates, and works together. And we have to add in works together with machines as well, because they are going to be not only our colleagues, but in some cases, they might be our bosses in one way, shape, or form. This is a monumental shift in humanity. Thomas L. Friedman calls this a Promethean moment, a moment in time that drastically changes who we are and how we will become. This is crazy because most Promethean moments are only known that they were Promethean moments years after they happened. And we are in it and we know it. Because the difference between the telegraph, the television, the telephone, the difference between those is they cost so much money, the average person couldn't even use it when they first came out. It took a long time for hardware and price to catch up to common use. Generative AI is here now. Everybody has access to it. For the most part, it is free, and it works on all the devices we already own. It is the fastest adopted tool and application in the history of computing and the history of the internet. And it is not stopping. And I want everybody to understand this. The age of AI now is the worst it is going to be. It is the worst images, the worst video, the worst music, the worst outputs it is ever going to be. That means it's going to be better tomorrow. And then it's going to be even better a year from now, and even better 10 years from now. Today is the worst it's going to be. And that's crazy to think about. And in fact, today is the 15th month anniversary of ChatGPT going public. It's only been 15 months, and it seems like this thing has taken over the world. Not taken over like Skynet in Terminator, or taken over like the AI in the Matrix, not that taken over, but it's really drastically changed how industry works, how businesses work, and it's going to change the way education works. I put this slide up because I want us to remind ourselves it has only been 15 months. And in those 15 months, in just the last month, these things have happened right here, right? At the World Government Summit in Dubai this month, the CEO of NVIDIA, one of the world's largest chip makers, stated, you know what? We've been talking about how coding is a necessary act that kids need to learn. That may not be the case anymore, because these tools are becoming so good at crafting code that all we have to do is talk to it, and it will do in coding what we ask. And he said he's recommending we got to go back to things like biology, focusing on education, manufacturing, farming. These are the things that AI won't drastically take over. I thought that was a powerful statement from somebody that is one of the most heaviest proponents of coding in education. It was crazy. And then this other one, Pi. Pi is almost like an SEL, social emotional learning, social emotional AI, because it can help you work through some problems, or help you identify what's going on in your life. For example, I asked it, hey, you know what? I'm going to be meeting with a bunch of educators, learning about AI. I want you to help them understand how AI is going to change their careers in the classroom. Can you please give us some encouraging words to showcase how AI is going to be powerful, but also alleviate any fears? And it went ahead and wrote this, but the power of AI is going into voice now. And so this is fantastic for our younger learners, because
To my wonderful educators, the power of AI in education is truly remarkable. By embracing AI as a tool, you'll be able to offer a level of personalized learning and support that's never been possible before. Imagine providing instant feedback on student work, or creating adaptive learning materials that cater to each student's unique needs and pace.
So that was just generated in a split second, and the voice read it, no problem. This is drastically going to change Audible. Think of Audible and how many people they pay to read these books. Now you just have an AI reading the book, right? Imagine you have a computer that uses emotional AI, where the camera can actually identify a student is not comfortable with the material they're learning because of the facial features they're doing, and it just speaks out saying, hey, I notice you're not you're not working, and is there a problem? Is there something I can help you out with? Their own little personal champion on every device. I like to think of that movie Flubber. In Flubber with Robin Williams, he has that little AI robot called Weibo that floated around with him and helped him out. That's where we're going, where every individual person will have their own personalized AI attached to everything to encourage them to do things more and better. It's going to be drastically changing. This just came out a little while ago. This right here is Sora. Like, and it looks like a pretty neat image. That was all AI generated through text. It did not exist before somebody prompted a young man in his 20s sitting on a piece of a cloud in the sky reading a book. That's all it prompted, and it generated this from scratch, or thin air, as that image will show you, right? Think about this, where you can have movies now created just by prompt engineers asking for scenes in a movie. Now, of course, you have graphic designers up in the air about this. Well, what about our jobs? And my reply to that is, what about the hand-drawn animators that got replaced by the computer-generated animators? This isn't something new where a job is replaced. It's constant throughout history, through advancement. I mean, look at this. That is generated by AI. Now, I had a friend say, I don't like that they put this out and they didn't open it to the public. And the answer to that was, do you really want this put to the public where anybody can create anything? And most of the people of this world have no idea that this would be faked? I mean, we have to educate the masses before we can release something like this out to the masses. And then finally, I just found this one today. This one creates any music of any style through a prompt. So I asked it in preparation for today, and this took about 3 minutes. So I'm not going to do it live because I don't want to waste 3 minutes. But I said, I want you to create me an epic 80s hair metal ballad about the power of education. And this is what it came up with. Hold on, there we go. In the class, I'm feeling the heat. I'm up, but now it's getting me. Thinking about the future, gotta make it right. Gonna rise to the top, gonna shine so bright. Rocking the books, yeah, we're taking it to the edge. I mean, come on. That sounds something like Warrant would have written back in the 80s. I mean, rocking the books, we're going to take it to the edge. And all I asked was a very silly, tiny little prompt. Imagine if that prompt was more thought out and ready to go. Imagine what music is going to come out. And it's just a drastic world. And I just wanted us to be aware of what's going on, because most adult Americans don't know this is going on. We are drastically undereducated in the power of AI, and it leads us to the idea that we are already fooled by quote unquote fake news, to have people not even understand that you can be fooled by fake video, fake audio, fake music. We need to educate more, and that's why the power of educators here need to make sure that we're educating our students on this, especially for digital media literacy, especially during a presidential election. And this is available not only to Americans, but also other countries that aren't necessarily friendly to the United States or Canada, right? We have to be aware of this because 82% of American adults haven't even tried ChatGPT. And this was from the Pew Research Center, and the link to this study is in my Padlet. They had to use the word ChatGPT because nobody understood when they said generative AI, because ChatGPT is now like the Kleenex of generative AI, right? So, but 82 haven't even tried it, and 50% of those people who said they didn't try it said because they're scared of it, so they don't even want to touch it. This is administrators at schools who are part of this 82%. This is teachers at schools that are a part of this 82%. This is your parents who are a part of this 82%. Before we drastically change how we use generative AI, we have to drastically educate our education community on the power of AI. Otherwise, people are not going to do it. And we have to also remember one thing, and I do this at the beginning of my session now because I always forget it at the end because I get so excited. If you have one takeaway from today, from all the sessions that you've done, you should remember that AI should never replace the work you love to do. If you love to design lessons from scratch, nobody's saying you need to use AI. If you love to reply to parent emails, nobody's saying you have to use AI. Right? So you should never let AI replace the work you love to do. It should replace the work, the remedial work, the busy work that you dread doing. AI should be there to do the work that you don't need to do. That's what AI should be there for. And that's how we should look at it. Find the stuff we don't like doing and see if AI can replace us in that. And lastly, I hear a lot about this across the country, and that is AI is going to disrupt education. AI is going to disrupt everything. Well, the definition of disruption is being surprised or caught off guard by something new that drastically changes what you're doing. You're only going to be disrupted if you put your head in the sand and don't look at what AI can do. That is discovery. We are at a point where we can still be discoverers and get ahead of this thing and make it work for us. And when I say this, I mean our students as well, because we missed the boat on social media. We have to acknowledge that. We felt social media was something they did outside the classroom. It didn't affect them inside the classroom, or that's their parents' job to teach them about social media. It's not ours as educators. And we now see how it bleeds into their personality as actual students. How they act online is bleeding into how they act face-to-face. Social media spats from kids are bleeding into school and causing disruptions. We can't have that with AI. We need to educate our students about what AI is, talk to them about proper uses, and talk to them about absolute abuses of AI. If we don't talk to them about it, we can't be upset when they abuse it. We have to acknowledge it, and we have to train them on how to use it properly. Because if you leave it up to their own devices, literally and figuratively, they are going to use it to complete all the work you give them. If they are trained and shown how it can help amplify the creative process, the creation process, the education process, it is going to help them become better students. It's going to be a co-pilot, not a crutch. And that's why we have to get on this now. Even though students aren't really allowed to use them on campus because of the age restrictions, we still need to acknowledge its existence and model its use on our computers for them. Because if it's not modeled by us, it's going to be modeled by the people that they follow on TikTok. And if you've seen how to use AI on TikTok to fool your teachers, jump on that channel. You get an insight into how kids are using this today. And then school districts are going to have to know that these tools will bleed in to all of the tools we use. It's going to be added to our SISs, student information systems. It's going to be added into our student management devices. It's going to be in our learning management. It's going to be everywhere. I remember a while ago, they used to talk about IoT, Internet of Things. How can we get all the things we connect to the internet to talk to one another? Now it's about apps. How can we get all of our apps to aggregate the data that we can now use with a large language model to help us predict what we can use these tools for, or create better lessons for students in need, or instantly change the Lexile level of an assigned paper without you having to actually do it. The computer identifies the Lexile level needed and automatically makes those changes for you. When the tools create that walled garden, that's what that black line around the district, that black circle around the district means. Once that walled garden is created, that means the company has said none of your school district data will leak out to the large language model. So nobody outside your districts can use your district's data, but you can use the larger data within the large language model. And that's going to happen. I truly believe there's going to be lots of announcements at ISTE. I truly believe this. If we are not buckling down at the end of the 23-24 school year, we are going to be in for a shock at the beginning of the 24-25 school year. But with all of these additions to all of these tools and all of these management systems, we have to take the United States Department of Education #1 recommendations to complete heart. Humans need to be in the loop at every single stage, right? Meaning, if you're linking all this to, let's say, a detention management system, and it's handing out detentions automatically for you, we need to step in and be like, look, it needs to be approved by a human before it's automatically assigned, because these things are full of biases and we don't want those leaking in to our decisions at our schools. And, lastly, I want to get through this quickly because you've probably been told about generative AI through all of your other sessions. But generative AI is a very complicated machine. In fact, it is built upon the deep learning model that Google wrote about in a 2016 paper. And it's built upon a model of the neural networking of our brain, right? Our brains are chock full of neurons, and everything that we get from our senses are sent through our brain, and our neurons make the decision if it's a sight, a smell, an auditory signal, a tactile signal, and it tells us what we are feeling. That's the output. The output is our feelings. That's what these things do. And that's what all of these little tiny nodes are on the figure to the left. These nodes over here are each almost like a different neuron that will make a decision. And when we put our input in, our prompt, it's going to hit a node, and that node has all of these different nodes it can send it to. And it's going to make a prediction on which node is going to be the best, and then the best, and then the best, and then the best, and then you finally have an output. The thing about these outputs are they are not predictable. Well, I take that back. The only output that's predictable is when you ask it to write an email, it will always start, "I hope this email finds you well." I don't know why. I guess that's how everybody starts their emails in the data sets. But it's not predictable. That means those who created this can explain how they created it. They really can't explain how it works. They don't know. Just like we don't truly understand how our brain completely works and does everything that it can. But when I start getting into neuroscience and all of this stuff, I get some glazed over eyes. And so I love to explain it to educators as Plinko. The Plinko chip, that is your prompt. And once you drop that prompt in, you have lost complete control. You can pray, you can hope, you can blow on the disc and hope that it hits that 10,000 mark, but it's completely up to the little nodes that it hits along the way to decide where it's going to make that output. It is not predictable. Now, you could imagine that when I speak about this to teachers, most of them understand. I do classroom presentations like this to students. They have no idea what Plinko is. They're more confused about Plinko than about the diagram off to the left. And so I show them this picture. This picture here is generative AI in a nutshell, right? And you're saying, well, Joe, this is a picture of Superman talking to his father from the 1978 film directed by Richard Donner. Yes, I am a comic book geek. But you see, the reason this is generative AI is because Superman is an alien. He comes from the planet Krypton. And when he was a baby, planet Krypton was going to explode. So his father, Jor-El, he went in and he programmed a crystal with every piece of information that was created by every Kryptonian from the beginning of their time. That's what these companies have done. Instead of a crystal, they have a vast data set that is fed information from all of, well, I don't want to say all of human history, but from a vast amount of human history, a vast amount of human creations, a vast amount of human writing. And when Superman came of age and he was on Earth and he threw that crystal, it creates the Fortress of Solitude, his father appears. But that is not his father. That is a generated replication of his father based upon photos that was fed to the crystal. And when Superman asks a question, that's the prompt, his father responds with a brand new response, not pre-recorded, but a brand new one based upon the data set within the crystal. That is generative AI. That seems like science fiction, but it's actually science fact now, because we can use these tools to actually create data sets of our loved ones who have passed. This company right here, Rememory, now says if you give us all the data you can about somebody who has passed away, or you want to prepare something before you pass away, they will create a generative twin of you so you can still answer questions. Now, this is a little bit morbid, I know, but imagine that you're walking through a cemetery And instead of just seeing somebody's name and their date and then that dash, and we always go, oh, the dash means they lived. Well, instead of a dash, imagine there was a QR code connected to something like this. You scan it and you can ask the person anything. Now, I don't want you thinking that I sit around or walk around cemeteries often. I do not. But I'm saying the reason we have a cemetery is to remember somebody. And instead of just staring at a headstone, what if we can chat with them? I would give anything to chat with my grandfather again, right? I know we have loved ones who have passed that we would give anything, even a generative version of them. And it's possible now. But in the classroom, imagine that you have a tool like a generative AI Alexa. And you say, Alexa, my students are learning about the Revolutionary War, and they would like to know some reasons the founding fathers decided to break away from British rule. Can you please become George Washington so we can ask him questions? Well, we have lots of letters from George Washington, lots of biographies written about him. It's possible. And in fact, if you have the right prompt, you can do this today in ChatGPT, in Gemini. But you can't ask it to become Benjamin Franklin. It'll tell you, I'm sorry, I am a chatbot, plus Benjamin Franklin is dead. I cannot become him. But if you said something like, we're going to role play. And in this role play, you are going to pretend to become Benjamin Franklin. And you're going to be asking questions. All right. So those are the things that we can do in the classroom today with the correct prompting. So I want you now, as I'm doing this, to pick your favorite generative tool that you've learned about in the past couple of days of what you've been using. For our practices, I would recommend ChatGPT because we're going to be doing some creative writing, and I do believe ChatGPT is more creative than Gemini. Again, I got to update this slide from Bard to Gemini. Now, the funny thing is this. People ask me all the time, out of these three, which one do you prefer? And I say, yes. And they go, that's not an answer. Well, I use them all for different purposes, right? It's just like we have three different friends. You may go to each friend for a different purpose. That's what these tools are. Like Bard would be like my know-it-all uncle, right? He comes in, has really great facts and really great answers, but he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He says, here's your answer, get out of here, right? That's basically Gemini, right? More factual, but nah, it doesn't sugarcoat it much. ChatGPT, it's like my mom. It has really good stories. It's very linguistically fun, but I question whether it's true or not, right? And then Claude is like a high school social studies teacher. They're fun, they're engaging, they may, flutter a little bit on whether they're accurate or not, but for the most part, I trust it. That would be Claude, right? And so they each have their own different personality to me. So if we look at these, they also have some extra features that you might like. So one of them, Gemini, it has all of your past chats off to the left-hand side. But what I love is that these chats, do not think of them as one and done situations. These are chats you can go back to and ask it follow-up questions. And if you want to do that, you want to pin it to the top. And so think of these as chat rooms, but you created the moderator, basically. So if I wanted to, like I have a conversation about the gold rush. If I want to keep going back and I'm doing research on the gold rush, I want to pin that. And I could pin it and it will always stay at the top. So I'm not searching through my past histories. But another cool thing that Gemini has added is this little Google tool. It says double check responses. Now, Gemini generated from scratch and its data set this response. It didn't copy and paste from the internet, but you don't know if it's actually true or not. So if I click on verify with Google, it'll actually take what it wrote and compare it to the internet, almost like a plagiarism detector does in our classrooms. And it will then highlight in green where it found corroborating evidence for that statement. And if I click on the down button, it'll explain where it found it. And I can go to that website. It'll take me to the exact spot where it found it so that I can corroborate that is where that was accurate. And I say that, and they utilize reputable sources during this search. So you're not going to some just in it random blog and saying, see, that blog said it, therefore it's true. It does reputable sources when it does these. And then another cool thing that I like is this share button. If I click share, it could send it to a Gmail or export it to Docs. Or if I wanted somebody to do a follow-up with this question. Sorry, one more thing. We always think it just creates one response. It actually creates three. It creates three drafts. And if you don't like draft one, you can click on draft two, click on draft three to see which one is better. But one of the cool things is that you can copy this right here, and then I can paste it into the chat.
Because it's at 3:10, right?
And all of you would be able to follow along with that. So it's really, really neat when we see it that way. So that one is Gemini. Again, I would use Gemini for research and planning. My family and I are going to Italy in a few months, and all I have to do is tell it where in Italy I'm going, what time of the year, where we're staying, and it'll create an itinerary of fun things to do. If I say I need some good food places, it'll create an itinerary for me, plus what I should wear because of the weather patterns for that. So it's pretty neat. And then, of course, you know, you have your Chat GPT, very similar to Gemini in that everything's off to the left-hand side. You cannot pin responses, unfortunately. I wish you could, but you can't. But I use Chat GPT for more creative writing. Maybe I wanted to spice up my blog posts, and I put my blog post in and say, hey, can you make this sound a little bit less formal? Or can you add some jokes along the way that I maybe can use? It does a much better job there. I use ChatGPT 4, but the free version would be ChatGPT 3.5, which is still very, very good. And then finally, Claude. I like Claude because in the free version, it allows you to attach a document. And so it allows you to attach a PDF. It allows you to attach a CSV file. And so I did that. I uploaded the first chapter of The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. And I said, hey, can you give me a summary of chapter 1 in a bullet point format? And it did that for me. And then I can easily come in and say, now, can you create me a 10-question multiple choice quiz for chapter 1? And it will then create me those 10 questions right there. So that is pretty neat. So I want you to choose one of these tools, either Gemini, ChatGPT, or Claude. And I want us to follow Amar's example. See, I did not get into generative AI for education. I got into it because of this guy's tweet. And I have 2 daughters, a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And this guy said, in 72 hours, using ChatGPT and an image generator called Midjourney, he was able to print copies of a book from scratch and have them in his hands in 72 hours. He used ChatGPT to take his idea and turn it into a children's text. He then went into Midjourney, taking that children's text and created images based upon the text. Then he went into Amazon Kindle digital publishing and arranged the pictures and the text. And then he did the print option and had them shipped to his house. And in 72 hours, he had it in his hand. And this was during Christmas, because this was December of 2022, right when ChatGPT had come out. And of course, Christmas time reminds me of my family watching Elf. And in that movie, Elf, there is a side story of a children's book company. And you have these creatives pitching ideas about what they should do. Now they never have to pitch because they can use ChatGPT to generate some ideas, right? So you don't ever need a Miles Finch in the world anymore. But this one guy off to the left-hand side was saying, I have a story. What about a tribe of asparagus children who are ashamed the way their pee smells? I thought that was hilarious. And ever since I saw this movie back in 2002, I thought that would be a hilarious children's book. So one of the very first things that I did was I wanted it to write me a children's book about asparagus children. And so I wrote a very short prompt. I would add more context today, but I would say I wrote in, write me a children's book about a new crop of vegetable children growing on a farm. You have all different types of vegetables, but one of them is an asparagus child, and he's made fun of by the other children because of the way his pee smells. He goes into the cornfields, finds a wise old owl who tells him sometimes our greatest weaknesses become our greatest strengths. He runs back to the farm because he hears some of the other vegetable children screaming. It's being attacked by insects, and the only thing that'll scare the insects away, the smell of asparagus pee, right? And so he saves the day. And so you can read that in the short story here called Andy Asparagus, You're in Trouble. And I read it to my daughters. They laughed. And I said, if I can write something like this in a matter of seconds, what can I do in the classroom? It blew my mind. And that's when the rabbit hole opened and I tumbled down it. So I want you to take 5 minutes right now. You're going to take 5 minutes, and we're only going to hold you to 5 minutes. And I'm going to answer some questions in the chat during this 5 minutes. But I want you to pick your favorite generative tool, Gemini, ChatGPT, or Claude. I recommend ChatGPT because we're doing creative writing, and it's one of the best for that. And what you're going to do is ask it to write you a children's book. But before you do, I want you to think of a child that has existed in your life, past, present, or future. And think of something that child went through. It could have been a mental or physical disability. It could have been maybe they broke their leg before the football season and what they had to do to get ready for the last game to be prepared for that. Like some trial that they had to go through. Maybe they were bullied. Maybe they are teased, something. And you're going to ask it to write a children's story for that. Add as much context as you can. Where is this happening? What time of the year? What location? What's the name of the town? Do they have any friends? Do they have any pets? Do they have any quirks? Add as much context as possible and then hit enter. So you have 4 minutes now to do that. And then I want you to, in the chat, you're going to give me a 0 to 5. We call that a fist to 5. A 0 being, this is the worst story I've ever read. I wish I never attended this session because now it exists. Or a 5 being, I can't believe it wrote this story. It's one of the best I've ever read, right? A fist to 5. And you have 4 minutes to do that. And I'm going to answer some questions here in the chat. About 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left. One more minute. One more minute. I know it's quick, but that's one of the points of this exercise to see how quickly you can Generate a brand new children's book based upon somebody you know. All right. So we're gonna move on from this. And if you're still writing your children's book or you're still reading it, just as you're finishing up, just please paste in the chat 0 to 5, 0 being it's a horrible story, and then a 5 being really great. Okay. So we're gonna go on. Now, I'm pointing out, ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, and you may be saying, my kids aren't using these tools. Well, number one, they're probably using ChatGPT at home. All right, let's not kid ourselves. But these tools, the API and the way these tools work, they're already being used in the tools we know. Canva has Magic Write text to image in their Magic Studio. Magic Write is ChatGPT based, so it's in there. Quizzes has a fantastic quiz builder where you can grab a news article, drop it into Quizzes, and it'll do a reading comprehension test for that quiz right there. It's crazy. Microsoft and Google, they're implementing it into all of their workspaces. So Microsoft has it being completely implemented into their new operating system. Goodbye Cortana. You're going to have Copilot, and it just updated. Like, I didn't even do anything. Like, my Windows machine now has it built right into the bottom right-hand corner. And then Google it's being implemented. I believe it's still called Duet, but they might have changed it to Gemini just to be the same name across the platform. But it's nuts at how fast these things are being adopted. The Khan Academy has Khan Amigo, which has ChatGPT 4 built in as a tutor. It's just a CurryPod allows you. It's almost like Nearpod. If you've never used Nearpod, it's a slide deck advancement tool. It'll create a slide deck for you with questions already pre-built into that slide deck. It's absolutely insane at what we're going through these tools. I recommend later today, if you're dabbling with some of these fun tools, check out CurryPod, check out Quizzes and what they're doing with AI, and then check out the Microsoft Designer Image Creator. Those are all free, and they do some amazing, amazing things. Looking at the chat, we have a lot of 3s. I love when we have 3s, which is really, really good. 4s and then 5s. We don't have any 0s, 1s, or 2s. I now want you to think back to what you gave it, and then imagine you gave somebody $1,000 to write that story for you. You might be a little bit more critical when money's on the line. So I always tell teachers, when looking at a prompt, imagine you paid somebody $1,000 for that. Are you okay with that? And they're like, no. So we need to do a follow-up prompt and tell it exactly what you liked and exactly what you hated, and tell them to do it again. But always say please when you're done. We never know when the AI overlords are going to take over, and we always have to point back. We always said please when we asked you these questions early on in your takeover. So that leads us to prompt engineering. Prompt engineering is something that is very important. It is how you craft a text and talk to these machines. Prompt engineering is exploding all over businesses. They are finding that if they have a really good prompt engineer and they have a team of 10, they can drop that team almost in half with somebody that can take what the other team members are ideating, and the prompt engineer can get it created in half the time than a team of 10 can. But what we're also finding is the best prompt engineers are experts in the business that hired them. So like if you're working for a genetics company, the best prompt engineers are going to have a degree in genetics, which is why people say, oh, this is going to take away from having to learn. No, I actually think to use these to the highest extent, you're going to have to even be better at your subject. The best story writers will be English teachers, right? The best critiquers of history prompts will be history teachers, social study teachers. That should empower us. And that should also make sure we tell our kids, now this does not replace learning. You're going to have to learn even more to get these tools. But if you're ever told by anybody, I have the answer to how to talk to these machines, just follow my pathway and you're going to be the best, they're full of it. They're full of it. This is the best advice that I ever got. You don't need a prompting guide. Now, what you need is something that does not come easy. What you really need is a strong grounding in language use, a relentless curiosity of a 5-year-old, and the intensity of a pig hunting truffles. That is how you need to attempt at prompting, because it takes tenacity when it comes back with a horrible response to go back and say, no, this is what I needed, and adding more context. You just keep going back to the well until it does what it is. But I think this is a great blueprint. It's not a framework. It's not a guideline. It's a blueprint, meaning something to help you build a good prompt. So this is a good blueprint. And these are 6 things that I want you to think about when crafting a prompt. Now, I want to say right off the bat, you don't have to use all 6 of these things every time you craft a prompt, but you should think about them on, do I need this, right? So first is the task. Now, the task is as simple as, I need you to create for me, or I need you to ideate with me. And the task doesn't even have to be the first thing you say, but there has to be a reason you're using this tool. So you need to ask it. If you wanted to write a children's book, you have to say, I need you to help me write a children's book, right? You're not just going to say, please write for me, right? You're going to say, you're going to give it more context. So number 1 is the task, right? It's the most important because it's what you're telling it to do. The meat of this, though, like the thing you should spend most of your time on, is the context. The more context you can give these tools, the better. And what I have found, the best way to add context is just have a conversation with the AI. That's one of the reasons I do love Gemini, is because there is a microphone feature where I can just sit back, hit the microphone and say, Gemini, I'm going to work with you today, and I don't want you to create anything for me yet. We're going to have a conversation, and you're going to ask questions and follow-up questions, and I'm going to respond to those questions. When we're done conversing, I am then going to ask you to do something for me. Do you understand? Because I'm building the context into the conversation. That's the way I love to prompt, not just sit there and type it. I want to preload my conversation first. It took me a while to get there, but that's all context. So when I was asking you to write your children's story, where you are located is key, because it can actually bring in local icons or different places around that area into the conversation. The time of year, because it'll bring in the feel of the weather, and maybe they're walking through snow. It's not going to have that if you say summer. So context is key. For classroom, if you're asking it to help you craft a lesson plan for you, one of the key things is, how often do you meet your students? A lot of classes, a lot of schools meet their kids every day. But when I taught 8th grade science, we were on a block schedule. So I only saw them 3 times a week, right? And so I would tell them that in my context. When crafting this lesson plan, understand I see all my students on Monday, and then again on Tuesday, and then again on Thursday, and only for 90 minutes. Then it'll make sure that context is used. An exemplar is referencing maybe a framework. So like if you're trying to implement more technology into your classroom, maybe you want to utilize ISTE's student framework. Maybe you want to implement ISTE's teacher framework. You want to state that in there. This is fantastic if there is any special education teachers. Maybe there's an IEP framework you want to reference when helping craft goals for an IEP. That is the exemplar. Is there something you want it to reference? A persona. How do you want it to write? This is something that I tell teachers, because a lot of time teachers see, I know I can catch a kid using AI because I know they don't write like that. That's like a college paper. Well, a kid can say, please write this in the voice of a 10th grade high school student. and it will remove all those upper vocabulary terms. And so persona can really change how something is written. Format or output. If you're crafting a lesson plan, do you want it in bullet points? Do you want it in a table? How do you want it to be visualized to you in the output? And then finally, tone or style. I love using tone or style when I'm writing emails. Like there's been times when I had to write an email home to a parent that I sat there for a half hour saying, should I hit send? Oh, are they going to take this the wrong way? I need them to know this happened, but how do I say that? Now you can go into the prompt and be like, hey, I need you to write this email. This is what happened. This is what I did. This is what I said to the kid. I need you to write the email home, but please make it light, but still sound important. And it will write it for you. And it does a really good job at hitting that tone. And so that's something that you definitely want to look into. And then we also have to acknowledge that outputs have biases in them. Everything that is inputted into these machines for the data set was written by humans throughout history. Throughout history, humans have biases. And when these tools first came out, they were so incredibly biased and racist and angry that's one of the reasons they weren't released to the public, because Google was like, we're not releasing this. So they had to go in and massage how it would output. They had to go in and say, please limit this kind of conversation, or limit this or limit that. And so one of the ways that we can limit biases, though, is acknowledging they exist and prompt those out. Because what's happening right now is these tools are shadow prompting. And so they'll take our prompt, they'll send it through a filter, rewrite our prompt, and it'll add in the, please include this, don't include this. Like they will shadow prompt so that the output looks nice and prim and proper and beautiful. You're like, yes. But it's because they added things to your prompt. That's why I love, after I prompt, I say, that was a great output. Can you now give me the actual prompt you used to write that? And you'd be surprised at what it actually comes back with, especially with image generators. Google just got it in a little bit of hot water for their new image generator because they prompted in to be very diverse in representation in images, and be mindful that men and women can be at any job there. But the problem is, somebody would say, give me images of our founding fathers, and you have females and different ethnicities in there, and it's like, well, that wasn't America back then, so that's not accurate. So they were getting in a little bit of trouble, and so it's because of the shadow prompting, and it's difficult. But one of the things we have to do while prompting is understand that we can prompt those things out using negative prompting and fair prompting. Negative prompting is explicitly saying what you do not want to see, right? Do not include. That is negative prompting. For example, if you want a scene of a convention center, but you don't want any people in it, you have to say, do not include people, right? That is negative prompting, telling it exactly what you do not want to see. So examples of do not include watermarks, do not include people. I don't want this to be photorealistic, so no photorealistic images. What do you not want to see? That is negative prompting. And then another one is fair prompting. Fair prompting is going in and explicitly thinking about your language before you type. Because we do have biases in our vocabulary that we don't even know that we're saying it. For example, whenever we receive mail, I ask my wife, hey, did the mailman come? And I get the response, it's a mail carrier. They're not all men, right? I'm like, oh, I'm just used to saying mailman, right? Or policeman, right? It's police officer. Fireman, fire official. Like, be explicit in how we're doing this, because if we say policeman and there's no shadow prompting involved, it's going to give us all renditions of men because we asked policeman. So fair prompting is understanding what we're saying, focus on what we're saying, and add descriptions or remove descriptions of what we don't want to see. That is an example of fair prompting. The reason I don't care for shadow prompting is I think it's almost washing away our need to admit that these biases exist These biases exist in the data set, and by acknowledging they exist and by prompting them out, it reminds us which of those biases are current. And it helps. I think that's a really good way of going about it. And then we also have to think about plagiarism in the classroom. Number one, it's not plagiarism when you're using AI. Plagiarism is when you're using somebody else's written work that is human. So the United States government does not see AI work as copyrightable, therefore it can't be plagiarized. But it is an abuse of AI, I believe, to allow a student to have it generate a completed work and then turn that in as their own. That is wrong. We would call that an AI abuse. We would call that's against academic integrity code. For example, in college, if you hire somebody to write your paper for you and you turn it in, you're in trouble. Even if the person's given you permission to use it, you're in trouble. That's against the academic integrity code. Utilizing AI to write something completely is against that code. So we have to acknowledge its existence with kids and craft site-based norms or district-based norms of what is unacceptable and what is acceptable. And this needs to be malleable. This needs to be constantly changing, because as soon as students get their hands on this in the classroom, they're going to do amazing things with it and amazing abuses with it. And so you're going to be adding to one column and adding to another, but it needs to be acknowledged. Otherwise, we can't be mad at a student for abusing what we believe as an abuse when we haven't acknowledged that it's an abuse to begin with. These are some examples, right? Using pieces of work that you didn't create to be turned in. These are all things. A couple things that I think can help us with this is getting kids excited about citing, right? Getting kids excited about explaining how they made these machines do their bidding for them, right? Almost like writing a social media post that's bragging about, hey, look what I did, right? That's the citations we want our kids to do. I do acknowledge that the APA and the MLA came out with different ways of citing AI. I tell you, I don't like them. It looks like they're shoehorning in old ideas into some fantastical new technology. We need to get kids excited to brag. That's how we learn how they truly use these tools. So I crafted this citation guideline of how we should ask our students to cite. Number one, the cite needs to be in the byline, right? You need to acknowledge AI was used somewhere in this paper underneath your name, right? So the teacher's not questioning, was AI used at all? They know right away. And then tagging every time you used it with an explanation. I used ChatGPT 4. Here was the prompt that I used. This was the purpose I used it for. Here's the original work that I inputted. I think AI is most powerful when we put in our work and ask it to manipulate what we've already written. And then a conclusion. Did it work for you? Would you do it again? What would you do differently? This is almost like a sneaky way of getting kids to reflect on how they're using AI, at the same time bragging to you and other kids how they used AI. I think this is the best way to bring AI out of the shadows, get kids to be confident that they can use it and it's not illegal for them to, but acknowledge how they used it. And maybe you'll learn a few tips by prompting through the kids actually putting those in. And so a couple ways that we can ensure students are abiding by kind of our rules is, number one, have them provide supporting documents, their brainstorms, their mind maps, their little notes that they've done if they're writing a paper for you. Don't just have them turn in the final draft. One of the cool things is, if you're using Google, you can use that little tool called document revision history, and you can see if they pasted something in. And there's a couple little tools like Draftback or Content Detector that will create for you a video, a fast forward video, maybe a time lapse of how the students were typing, and you can see giant places where they pasted something in. Like, that's an indication to bring a kid up going, I noticed you didn't say you used AI, but I see this giant chunk was pasted in. And then some of the tools actually give you a graph. So this even slope means they typed normally over time, no copies and pastes, where this giant step graph indicates they copied and pasted vast amounts. that's another indication to bring them up for conversation. These are not things for you to go, haha, I got you. They're things for you to say, we need to have a conversation about how you're using AI. Because you're not citing it, you're not telling me you're using it, but I know you are. So let's have that conversation, right? Bringing it out. And then, of course, how are teachers and students utilizing these today? Teachers are using it to help them craft lesson designs that are standards aligned, creating writing prompts and feedback on written work. In fact, a lot of the tools out there that ask for free responses now have auto grading features, auto feedback features with AI. It's crazy of how many of these tools have this built in now. Creating new PE or health games. I have a friend who's a PE teacher in Wyoming, and he's like, oh, I don't need to use AI. I'm like, have you tried asking it to create new games for you with the tools you already have? It's amazing. Most of them are just like a knockoff of Quidditch, but still, they're cool. Social media posts, talking to historical figures, changing the Lexile levels of a paper. Instead of handing out one document, you hand out 3 different levels for the kids you know who can read higher, who are at grade level and are at lower grade level, but still get the meat of the paper. Fantastic. And then also helping write accommodations or modifications for students who are at risk. And I know our time is up. I do apologize. All of these different prompts are in that bottom where it says qlearns.org/AI_prompt. All of these examples are there for you to copy and paste and try them out. There's standards, curriculum design, writing emails to parents, crafting new PE games, letters of recommendation to staff and students, differentiation of reading levels, history, role play, quick formative assessment checks and creations, how students are using these, how administrators are using these. They're all over these. Please use these things if you want to get teachers. If this is stuff that will get them excited, please feel free to use my analogies. All I ask is you to throw me a bonus. Hey, Joe Marquez from Q gave this analogy. That's all the credit you need to give me. My role is to get teachers ready for this to hit the classroom, to get to the kids before they are so far along that they aren't going to listen to our rules when we put them in the classroom. My job is to get everybody excited and not fearful. And our job is to cultivate a community of learners that includes our students, includes our staff, includes our administrators, includes our school boards, includes our parents, of an understanding what AI is and what it isn't. It is not something to be feared. It is something to be revered. And this is something our kids will be using in college and their career. And we need to get them to understand how it is utilized today. So I appreciate each and every one of you joining me today. Again, like I said, 60 minutes is not even nearly enough time to get through a session like this, but you have my email. Feel free to reach out at any time. We are all now best friends. So thank you, each and every one of you. Have a fantastic rest of your conference. And I hope one day we can meet each other instead of in little boxes. We can meet each other in person. So thanks, everyone. Have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful day.
Joe, thanks so much.
You got it. My pleasure.
Really appreciate you being here. Good stuff. Pastor Joe in the house, everybody. Bringing the good news. So thank you. We're going to end this and give everybody a quick break, and then we'll come back to close the day out with Derek.